As you guys can remember, yesterday I made a video on Fantastic Mr. Fox. We went up to 5 chapters. If you haven't seen that video, click it right there and watch it now. Anyways, here we're going to be reading another 5 chapters of Fantastic Mr. Fox. This is a lovely series and I hope you enjoy. The terrible tractors. As the sun rose the next morning, Boggis and Bunce and Bean were still digging. They dug a hole so deep you could put a house into it. But they had not yet come to the end of the fox's tunnel. They were all very tired and cross. "Dang and blast," said Boggis. "Whose rotten idea was this?" "Bean's idea," said Bunce. Boggis and Bunce stared at Bean. Bean took another swig of cider, then put the flask back into his pocket without offering it to the others. "Listen," he said angrily. "I want that fat fox. I'm going to get that fox. I'm not giving in till I'm strung him over my front porch, dead as a dumpling." "We can't get him by digging, that's for sure," said the fat Boggis. "I've had enough of digging." Bunce, the little pot-bellied dwarf, looked up at Bean and said, "Have you got any more stupid ideas then?" "What?" said Bean. "I can't hear you." Bean never took a bath. He never even washed. As a result, his ear holes were clogged with all kinds of muck and wax and bits of chewing gum and dead flies and stuff like that. This made him almost deaf. "Speak louder," he said to Bunce, and Bunce shouted back, "Got any more stupid ideas?" Bean rubbed the back of his neck with a dirty finger. He had a boil coming there and it itched. "We need on this job," he said, "is machines. Mechanical shovels. We'll have 'em out in 5 minutes with mechanical shovels." This was a pretty good idea, and the other two had to admit it. "All right then," Bunce said, taking charge. "Boggis, you stay here and see the fox doesn't escape. Bunce and I will go fetch our machinery. If he tries to get out, shoot him quick." The long, thin Bean walked away. The tiny Bunce trotted after him. The fat Boggis stayed. Soon, 2 enormous caterpillar tractors with mechanical shovels on their front end came clanking into their wood. Bean was driving one, Bunce the other. The machines were both black. They were murderous, brutal-looking monsters. "Here we go, then," shouted Bean. "Death to a fox," shouted Bunce. The machines went to work, biting huge mouthfuls of soil out of the hill. The big tree under which Mr. Fox had dug his hole in the first place was toppled like a matchstick. On all sides, rocks were sent flying, trees were falling, and the noise was deafening. Down in the tunnel, the foxes crouched, listening to the terrible clanging and banging overhead. "What's happening, Daddy?" cried the small foxes. "What are they doing?" Mr. Fox didn't know what was happening or what they were doing. "It's an earthquake!" cried Mrs. Fox. Look, our tunnel's got shorter. I can see daylight." They all looked round, and yes, the mouth of the tunnel was only a few feet away from them now, and in the circle of daylight beyond, they could see 2 huge black tractors almost on top of them. "Tractors!" shouted Mr. Fox, "and mechanical shovels. Dig for your life. Dig, 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 dig. The race. Now there began a desperate race. The machines against the foxes. In the beginning, the hill looked like this. After about an hour, the machines spit away more and more soil from the hilltop. It looked like this. Sometimes the foxes would gain a little ground and the clanking noises would go fainter and fainter. And Mr. Fox would say, "We're going to make it. I'm sure we are." But then a few moments later, the machines would come back at them and the crunch of the mighty shovels would get louder and louder. Once the foxes actually saw the sharp metal edge of one of the shovels as it scraped the earth just behind them. "Keep going, my darlings," panted Mr. Fox. "Don't give up." "Keep going," the fat Boggis shouted to Bunce and Bean. "We'll get him any moment now." "Haven't you caught sight of him yet?" Bean called back. "Not yet," shouted Boggis, "but I think you're close." "I'll pick him up with my bucket," shouted Bunce. "I'll chop him to pieces." By lunchtime, the machines were still at it, and so were the poor foxes. The hill now looked like this. The farmers didn't stop for lunch. They were too keen to finish their job. "Hey there, Mr. Fox," yelled Bunce, leaning out from his tractor. "We're coming to get you now." "You've had your last chicken," yelled Boggis. "You'll never come prowling round my farm again." All sort of madness had taken hold of the three men. The tall, skinny Bean and dwarfish pot-belly Bunce were driving the machines like maniacs, racing the motors and making the shovels dig at a terrific speed. The fat Boggis was hopping about like a dervish and shouting, "Faster, faster!" By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, this is what happened to the hill. The hole the machines had dug was like the crater of a volcano. It was such an extraordinary sight that the crowds of the villagers came to look. They stood on the edge of the crater and stared down at Boggis, Bunce, and Bean. Hey there, Boggis, what's going on?" "We're after a fox." "You must be mad." The people jeered and laughed. But this only made the three farmers more furious and more obstinate and more determined than ever not to give up until they had caught the fox. "We'll never let him go." At 6 o'clock in the evening, Bean switched off the motor of his tractor and climbed down from the driver's seat. Bunce did the same. Both men had enough. They were tired and stiff from driving the tractors all day. They were also hungry. Slowly, they walked over to the small fox's hole in the bottom of the huge crater. Bean's face was purple with rage. Bunce was cursing, and the fox with dirty words that cannot be printed. Boggis came waddling up. "Dang and blast that filthy, stinking fox," he said. "What the heck do we do now?" "I'll tell you what we don't do," Bean said. "We don't let him go." "We'll never let him go," Bunce declared. "Never, never, never," cried Boggis. "Did you hear that, Mr. Fox?" yelled Bean, bending in low and shouting down the hole. "It's not over, Mr. Fox. We're not going home till we strung you up as a dingbat." Whereupon the three men all shook hands with one another and swore a solemn oath that they would not go back to their farms farms until the fox was caught. "What's the next move?" asked Bunce, the pot-bellied dwarf. "We're sending you down the hole to fetch him up," said Bean. "Down you go, you miserable midget." "Not me!" screamed Bunce, running away. Ben made a sickly smile. When you smiled, you saw his scarlet gums. You saw more gums than teeth. "Then there's only one thing to do," he said. "We'll starve him out. We camp here day and night watching the hole. He'll come out in the end. He'll have to." So Boggis and Bunce and Bean sent messages down to their farms asking for tents, sleeping bags, and supper. The foxes began to starve. That evening, 3 tents were put up in the crater on the hill. One for Boggis, one for Bean, and one for Bunce. The tents surrounding Mr. Fox's hole, and the 3 farmers sat outside their tents eating their supper. Boggis had 3 boiled chickens smothered in dumplings. Bunce had 6 donuts filled with disgusting goose liver paste, and Bean had 2 gallons of cider. All 3 men kept their guns beside them. Boggis picked up a steaming chicken and held it close to Mr. Fox's hole. "Can you smell this, Mr. Fox?" he shouted. "Lovely, tender chicken. Why don't you come up and get it?" The rich scent of chicken wafted down the tunnel to where the foxes were crouching. "Oh, Dad," said one of the small foxes, "couldn't we just sneak up and snatch it out of his hand?" "Don't you dare. That's just what they want you to do." "But we're so hungry," they cried. "How long will it be till we get something to eat?" Their mother didn't answer them, nor did their father. There was no answer to give. As darkness fell, Bunce and Bean switched on the powerful headlamps of 2 tractors and shone them on the hole. "Now," said Bean, "we'll take it in turns to keep watch. One watches while 2 sleep, and so on throughout the night." Boggis said, "What if the fox digs a hole right through the hill and comes out the other side? You didn't think of that one, did you?" "Of course I did," said Bean, determining he had. "Go on then, tell us the answer." Bean picked up something in black out of his ear and flicked it away. "How many men have you got working on his farm?" 35, Boggis said. "I've got 36. Bunce said. "And I've got 37, Bean said. "That makes 108 men altogether. We must order them to surround the hill. Each man will have a gun and a flashlight. There will be no escape for Mr. Fox whatsoever." So the order went down to the farms, and that night 108 men formed a tight ring around the bottom of the hill. They were armed with sticks and guns and hatchets and pistols and all sorts of other horrible weapons. This made it quite impossible for a fox, or indeed any other animal, to escape from the hill. The next day, the watching and waiting went on. Boggis, Bunce, and Bean sat upon small stools, staring at the fox's hole. They didn't talk much. They just sat there with their guns on their laps. Every so often, Mr. Fox would creep a little closer towards the mouth of the tunnel and take a sniff. Then he would come back again and say, "They're still there? Are you quite sure?" Miss Fox would ask. "Positive," said Mr. Fox. "I can smell that man Bean a mile away. He stinks." Chapter 9. One more chapter to go. Mr. Fox has a plan. For 3 days and 3 nights, this waiting game went on. "How long can a fox go without food or water?" asked Boggis on the 3rd day. not much longer now, Bean told him. He'll make a run for it soon. He'll have to. Bean was right. Down in the tunnel, the foxes were slowly but surely starving to death. If only we could just have a tiny sip of water, said one of the small foxes. Oh, Dad, can't you do something? Couldn't we make a dash for it, Dad? We'd have a little bit of a chance, wouldn't we? No chance at all, snapped Mrs. Fox. I refuse to let you go up there and face those guns. I'd sooner you stay down here and die in peace. Mr. Fox had not spoken for a long time. He had been sitting quite still, his eyes closed, not even hearing what others were saying. Miss Fox knew that he was trying desperately to think of a way out. And now, as she looked at him, she saw him stir and slowly get to his feet. He looked back at his wife. There was a little spark of excitement dancing in his eyes. What is it, darling? Said Mrs. Fox carefully. What? They cried. Oh, Dad, what is it? Come on, said Mrs. Fox. Tell us quickly. Well, said Mr. Fox. Then he stopped and sighed. No good, he said. It won't work after all. Why not, Dad? Because it means more digging, and we aren't any. And none of us are strong enough for that after 3 days and nights without food. Yes, we are, cried the small foxes, jumping up and running to their father. We can do it. You see if we can't. So can you. Mr. Fox looked at the 4 small children, and he smiled. What fine children, he thought. They're starving to death, and they hadn't had a drink for 3 days. They're still undefeated. I mustn't let them down. I suppose we could give it a try, he said. Let's go, Dad. Tell us what you want us to do. Slowly, Mrs. Fox, got to her feet. She was suffering more than any of them from lack of food and water. She was very weak. I'm so sorry, she said, but I don't think I'm to be much help. You stay right here, my darling, said Mr. Fox. We can handle this by myself. Chapter 10. As I said, we're going to read 5 more chapters, and that is all for today. Please, guys, read on, have a terrific day, and bye.